Hi, I'm Wade Boyd, and this is my informative speech. If my audience could please introduce themselves.
Brian.
Jim. Lonnie.
Carolyn, Amy,
Cassie.
Now that my audience has been introduced, let's get on with the speech. Can you think of any one band that has been credited with inventing a brand new genre of music? Maybe you can think of one band or a number of bands that have been instrumental in their own respective genres, such as the Rolling Stones or the Beatles, for rock music, or Robert Johnson and Charlie Patton, who were crucial to the formation of the Delta Blues in the early 1920s and 30s. But I would bet that most people can't think of a genre that was pioneered by just one band. So that's why I think it's amazing that the invention of heavy metal music is pretty much entirely credited to one band, Black Sabbath. Black Sabbath's eerie sound is pretty much what happens when you try to make music with the sole purpose of freaking people out. And so it's only logical that all future and rock and metal musicians took great influence from Black Sabbath's sound when they decided to start their bands of their own in future years. As someone who likes music a lot, it's fascinating to me how one band could have so much influence over one genre of music while starting a whole brand new one, all on their own. So today, I will take you all on a 50-year-long musical journey that covers Black Sabbath's influence of rock and metal. First, however, we'll need to travel 60 years ago to Birmingham, England, where one tragic industrial accident changed music forever. In December of 1965, a worker in a steel sheet factory named Tony Iommi was finishing his last day of work at that factory when all of a sudden an industrial steel cutter sliced off the tips of his ring and middle fingers. And the doctor said that Tony Iommi would never be able to play the guitar again. But however, according to Andrew Cope, Iommi was not deterred and instead fashioned new fingertips out of leather scraps and plastic bottle caps. And these prosthetic fingertips, along with a lighter gauge of guitar string that he put on his guitar, allowed Iommi to continue playing. And honestly, the loss of his fingertips helped shape Black Sabbath's tone. The sound of the prosthetics was different than compared to the sound of human fingertips would make against a guitar string. And as mentioned, he used lighter gauge string, which helped him with the pain in his fingers, but also allowed him to bend the notes further up, which helped in their solos. And thirdly, Tony Iommi down-tuned his guitar to make it easier to play, and this would also shape Black Sabbath sound, along with rock and metal sound in general. And this is according to S. Rosen's 1996 book, Wheels to Confusion, The Story of Black Sabbath. 3 years after Tony Iommi lost his fingertips in 1968, he would start a band called Earth with Ozzy Osbourne, Bill Ward, Terrence Geezer Butler. And this band called Earth, which later renamed itself to Black Sabbath in 1969, would take great influence from classic rock bands such as the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, and Cream, according to a Tony Iommi fan blog. And Black Sabbath were different from the bands that came before them by taking inspiration from horror movies and their soundtracks, which they actually got their name from. The 1963 Italian horror movie, Black Sabbath, which I think is really cool. And they incorporated elements from these horror movie scores into their music, which is something no one really ever did before them. Black Sabbath's first song, aptly named Black Sabbath, was unique as it used the tritone, or the diminished fifth, which is a very dissonant interval to the human ear, which only amped up their creepiness factor by a factor of 11. And this would be a common trick that pretty much all rock and metal musicians would use going forth from this point. And the influence that poor elements of dissonant harmony would shape what people thought music could be was really revolutionary, and it shaped what future musicians would do after them. Bands such as Metallica, Judas Priest, and Soundgarden would expand upon these sounds of down-tuning, horror elements, and distortion in their own music. Metallica's 1986 song, The Thing That Should Not Be, is inspired by H.P. Lovecraft's novel, The Call of Cthulhu, And this is directly out of the Black Sabbath playbook of using horror movie elements to help with the songwriting process. And mentioned before, nearly all metal bands after Black Sabbath would use loud, distorted guitars. And later bands, especially in the doom metal subgenre, would take downtuning to the absolute extreme. Sometimes they would tune their low E string an octave below that low E, and this only helped with the more fuzzy and piercing sound that the genre is associated with. Now that we've kind of scratched the surface of Black Sabbath's early music, now we can look at their later career in the 1970s and 1980s. And this era of Black Sabbath is just as influential as late 60s, early 70s Black Sabbath. Songs such as Changes off of their fourth album, Volume 4, is influential to rock and metal music. Changes is a slower song that actually doesn't even feature a guitar. It's just Tony Iommi on the piano and Ozzy Osbourne singing. And this demonstrated that rock and metal music could really be something beautiful. And it would influence bands like Metallica to make slower, more emotional songs like Fade to Black or Nothing Else Matters. And their later albums with their second vocalist, Ronnie James Dio, would inspire progressive metal, power metal, and doom metal. Songs off of Volume 4 and Sabbath Bloody Sabbath challenged the traditional song structure of verse, chorus, verse, and incorporated use of synthesizers and keyboards, which you don't really see outside of progressive rock and progressive metal. And as mentioned before, Dio's high-pitched, more operatic style of singing would be influential on power metal bands such as Blind Guardian and Sabaton. From the fast and aggressive to the slow and thoughtful, Black Sabbath has left their mark on rock and metal. In the speech, we've gone over the influence Black Sabbath had on rock and metal music. From the thematic elements to the musical composition, we've covered how these musical juggernauts have not only impacted rock music, but have instead spawned the genre of heavy metal, and how Black Sabbath has influenced generations of young musicians and songwriters, and really pushed the envelope of what it means to be a musician. And so Black Sabbath are not just any band, they're a metal institution standing high above the rest. Thank you.
Ron. Jim. Lonnie.
Carolyn, Amy.
Cassie.
Thank you.